Listen to the bells. It is the morning of Tuesday, July the 14th, 1789, and the air over Paris is vibrating with the frantic, rhythmic tolling of the tocsin. These are the alarm bells ringing out from the steeples of dozens of churches, tearing through the humid summer air and pulling the city from a restless, terrified sleep. There is no gentle dawn today. The sky above the Seine is hazy, thick with the smoke of smoldering toll gates that were burned to the ground the night before. Paris is a city on the absolute brink of explosion. The air smells of unwashed bodies, raw sewage from the open gutters, wood smoke, and the sharp, metallic tang of fear. To understand this day, you must feel the grinding, hollow ache in the stomachs of the people. It is the worst economic crisis in living memory. A loaf of bread now costs a month's wages for a common laborer. For months, the people have starved while looking toward the glittering palace of Versailles, where the king and his court seemingly feast in oblivious luxury. But today, the hunger has finally hardened into something else. It has hardened into rage. In the cramped, labyrinthine streets of the Faubourg Saint-Antoine, the working-class heart of eastern Paris, the day begins in shadows. The sun struggles to penetrate the narrow alleys where the timber-framed houses lean so closely together they almost touch at the top. Here, a blacksmith wipes soot from his forehead, his forge already roaring, but he is not making horseshoes today. He is hammering iron into crude pikes. Beside him, his wife, a seamstress with calloused fingers, is tearing up old linen to make bandages. They do not speak much. The grim determination in their eyes says everything. Out in the street, the cobbles are already clattering with the sound of wooden sabots. Thousands of ordinary people, carpenters, tanners, shoemakers, and laborers, are pouring out of their tenement buildings. These are the sans-culottes, the people without the silk knee breeches of the wealthy, and they are moving with a terrifying, unified purpose. Across the city, in the wealthy enclaves of the Marais and the Faubourg Saint-Germain, the morning looks vastly different. Here, the grand limestone townhouses of the aristocracy and the upper bourgeoisie are locked tight. Heavy wooden shutters are bolted shut. Inside a lavishly decorated drawing room, a wealthy silk merchant paces across his Persian rug, his powdered wig sitting slightly askew on his sweating head. He listens to the distant roar of the crowd and the incessant ringing of the bells. He has ordered his servants to barricade the heavy oak doors with furniture. He is not just afraid of the king's foreign mercenary troops, who are rumored to be marching on Paris to slaughter the citizens. He is equally terrified of the Parisian mob. If the poor decide to turn their fury on the rich, his wealth will not save him. It will condemn him. He clutches a silver pocket watch, watching the hands tick past 7 in the morning, wondering if his city will survive to see the sunset. The center of the storm is the Palais Royal, the grand arcaded garden owned by the king's liberal cousin, the Duke of Orléans. For days, this has been the headquarters of the revolution. Even at this early hour, the cafes under the colonnades are packed to the bursting point. The air is thick with pipe smoke, the smell of roasted coffee, and the deafening roar of overlapping voices. Men stand on tables, their coats discarded in the stifling heat, screaming themselves hoarse. They are reading aloud from radical pamphlets and shouting the news that has broken the city's sanity. King Louis XVI has fired Jacques Necker, the finance minister who was seen as the only man who cared about the starving people. To the crowds in the Palais Royal, this dismissal is a declaration of war. It is the signal that the king's armies, currently encircling Paris, are about to attack. The citizens have pinned green leaves to their hats and coats, plucking the trees of the Palais Royal bare, using the color of hope as their makeshift badge of rebellion. But hope is not enough to stop a royal army. The people need weapons. By 9 in the morning, a massive human tide is flowing through the streets toward the west. It is a chaotic, terrifying, and awe-inspiring sight. Tens of thousands of people are marching together. There are the poissards, the fearsome fishwives from the central markets of Les Halles, wielding their long, curved gutting knives, their aprons still stained with fish blood. There are young law clerks, their neat coats dusty, carrying stolen hunting rifles. There are mutinous soldiers from the French guards who have abandoned their royal oaths to join the people, marching in their blue and white uniforms alongside the ragged poor. The heat of the July sun is already beating down on the paving stones, baking the city. causing a massive cloud of dust to rise above the marching column. Their destination is the Hôtel des Invalides, the grand military hospital and armory built by Louis XIV. As the mob approaches the sprawling, majestic complex with its gleaming golden dome, the ground literally shakes with the tramp of their feet. Inside, the governor of the Invalides watches from a window, his blood running cold. He has a garrison of veteran soldiers, but they are old, many of them missing limbs from past wars, and they have already made it clear they will not fire on their fellow Parisians. The crowd surges against the iron gates. The chanting is a physical force, a wall of sound demanding arms. The negotiations are brief and futile. The gates are forced open, and the mob floods into the courtyards and the underground vaults. It is a scene of frantic, dizzying triumph. Men and women break open wooden crates, their hands grasping the cold, oiled steel of military muskets. Within an hour, nearly 32,000 muskets are dragged out into the daylight. You can see the pure, intoxicating thrill on the faces of the poorest laborers as they shoulder these weapons. A beggar who has spent his life bowing to passing carriages is suddenly a soldier of the revolution. But as the cheers echo off the stone walls of the Invalides, a grim realization ripples through the crowd. They pull the triggers of their new weapons, and only a dry click answers. They have 32,000 muskets, but they have not found a single barrel of gunpowder. The guns are useless heavy clubs without it. The shout goes up, starting as a murmur and swelling into a deafening roar that will echo through history. They know exactly where the king has moved the city's gunpowder. They know where the ultimate symbol of royal tyranny stands. 2. The Bastille. It is now midday. The sun is directly overhead, turning the narrow streets of Paris into an oven. The mob, now armed but vulnerable, shifts its immense weight and begins the long trek back across the city to the east. Looming over the working-class neighborhoods of the Faubourg Saint-Antoine, the Bastille is a nightmare in stone. It is a medieval fortress, a relic of the 100 Years' War, boasting 8 massive round towers that rise over 80 feet into the sky. Its walls are 10 feet thick at the base. A deep, dry moat surrounds it, isolating it from the city. For centuries, this fortress has been a state prison, a place where the king could send anyone, a rebellious noble, a loud-mouthed writer, a political enemy with a simple sealed letter, without trial, without appeal. It is the physical manifestation of absolute, unchecked power. Today, it holds roughly 250 barrels of gunpowder. Inside the fortress, the atmosphere is suffocatingly tense. The governor of the Bastille, the Marquis de Launay, stands on the high battlements, looking down at the sea of humanity gathering in the square. De Launay is a man out of his depth. He is not a seasoned combat commander. He is an administrator who bought his position. He wipes sweat from his brow with a lace handkerchief, his eyes darting across the sprawling, angry mob. He has only 114 soldiers to defend the massive fortress, 32 highly trained Swiss guards, speaking German and gripping their muskets with cold professionalism, and 82 invalid veterans. He has cannons mounted on the towers, pointing down at the densely packed streets. If he fires, he will slaughter hundreds. If he surrenders, he hands the royal arsenal to a mob. Down in the Place de la Bastille, the noise is deafening. The crowd has swelled to over nearly 1,000 active besiegers, with tens of thousands more watching from the surrounding streets, packed into every available window and standing on the rooftops. The heat is oppressive. The smell of unwashed bodies, cheap wine, and adrenaline hangs thick in the air. Delegations from the city hall arrive, men in fine coats pushing through the ragged crowd, waving white handkerchiefs. They cross the first drawbridge into the outer courtyard to negotiate with de Launay. They ask him to pull back the cannons and hand over the gunpowder. De Launay, hoping to buy time for royal reinforcements that will never arrive, agrees to pull the cannons back from the embrasures, but he refuses to surrender the fortress. He even invites the delegates to stay for lunch. But outside, the crowd does not know what is happening. They only see the cannons being moved, and paranoia runs deep. Rumors spread like wildfire through the packed square. The delegates have been taken hostage. The cannons are being loaded with grape shot. The king's troops are coming up from behind. The tension is a physical weight, stretching tighter and tighter until it inevitably snaps. Around 1:30 in the afternoon, a group of impatient, daring men climb onto the roof of a perfumer's shop. that leans against the outer wall of the fortress. With hatchets and hammers, they smash the heavy iron chains holding the outer drawbridge. The massive wooden bridge comes crashing down with a sound like a thunderclap, crushing a man beneath it. The crowd roars, a sound of pure, unbridled triumph, and surges forward into the outer courtyard. From the high towers, the defenders look down at the mob flooding their perimeter. Someone shouts an order. To this day, no one knows which side fires first. But suddenly, the sharp cracking report of a musket shatters the summer air. Instantly, the courtyard erupts into absolute hell. The Swiss guards, firing from the safety of the battlements and the narrow slit windows, unleash a devastating volley into the densely packed crowd. Down below, the carnage is immediate and horrific. Men fall screaming, their blood pooling on the hot cobblestones. The smell of sulfurous black powder instantly overpowers the stench of the city. The crowd, rather than fleeing, is driven into a state of berserk fury. The citizens who have muskets begin firing back, aiming blindly at the high stone walls, their lead balls chipping uselessly against the 10-foot-thick medieval masonry. For hours, the siege is a chaotic, bloody stalemate. The noise is a continuous deafening roar of musket fire, screams of the wounded, the smashing of wood, and the relentless tolling of the church bells in the distance. The courtyard is choked with thick, white, acrid smoke that burns the eyes and throats of the attackers. A brewer named Santerre, a massive man with a booming voice, tries to organize the mob, directing them to set fire to carts of damp straw to create a smokescreen. The heat from the burning straw, combined with the blazing July sun, makes the courtyard feel like the center of an inferno. A young woman, a laundress, runs through the crossfire carrying a bucket of water and a basket of torn rags, frantically trying to bind the wounds of a dying carpenter. Nearby, a wealthy bourgeois lawyer, his fine coat stained with soot and someone else's blood, is desperately trying to reload a musket, his hands shaking so violently he drops his ramrod. The sheer courage of the ordinary Parisians is staggering. They are standing in the open, being slaughtered by professional soldiers hidden behind stone, and yet they do not run. They drag their dead and wounded back into the surrounding streets, leaving trails of bright red blood on the white dust. And then they return to the barricades. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, over 80 citizens lie dead in the courtyard, and dozens more are bleeding out in makeshift hospitals and nearby taverns. The attack is faltering. The sheer, impassable height of the Bastille seems to mock the revolution. But then, the tide turns. The sound of marching boots and the heavy rhythmic rumbling of wooden wheels on cobblestones cuts through the din of the battle. The crowd parts, cheering wildly. It is the mutinous French guards, the highly trained royal soldiers who have defected to the people. They march in perfect formation, their blue coats dusty, but their discipline intact. And most importantly, they have brought cannons, 5 artillery pieces, dragged by hand all the way from the Invalides. The professional soldiers take command of the chaos. They swiftly position the cannons, aiming them directly at the main gate and the heavy inner drawbridge of the Bastille. The gunners, faces blackened with powder, load the heavy iron balls. The fuse is lit. The cannons roar, shaking the very foundations of the surrounding houses. The iron balls smash into the heavy timber and iron of the Bastille's gates. Wood splinters. Stone dust showers down. Up on the battlements, Governor Delaunay realizes he is doomed. He looks out over the endless sea of angry faces, stretching as far as the eye can see down the Faubourg Saint-Antoine. He looks at the cannons currently battering his gate to kindling. He knows the king's army is not coming. In a moment of absolute despair, he grabs a lit torch and runs toward the powder magazine, intending to blow the entire fortress and a large chunk of eastern Paris straight to heaven. But his own soldiers tackle him to the stone floor. The veteran guards have had enough. They force Delaunay to surrender. At 5 o'clock in the evening, a white handkerchief is waved from the towers. The firing slowly stutters to a halt. The heavy, smoke-filled air hangs silently for a heartbeat. Then, the massive inner drawbridge slowly creaks open and lowers over the moat. The dam breaks. The crowd floods into the dark, cool, cavernous interior of the Bastille. It is a moment of pure, chaotic ecstasy and terrible vengeance. The citizens, eyes wild with adrenaline, grief, and triumph, disarm the Swiss guards and the veterans. They smash the furniture, hurl the fortress's archives out of the windows like a snowstorm of parchment. and race down into the damp, lightless dungeons to free the victims of royal tyranny. They find only 7 prisoners. 4 are forgers, 2 are madmen, and 1 is a deviant aristocrat. It does not matter. To the crowd, they are martyrs dragged from the jaws of hell. They are hoisted onto the shoulders of the mob, bewildered and blinking in the harsh sunlight. But the bloodlust of the crowd has not been sated. They have lost nearly 100 brothers, fathers, and sons today. They drag Governor Delaunay out of the fortress. He is stripped of his fine coat, his sword broken. The mob pushes him, beats him, and spits on him as they march him through the streets toward the Hôtel de Ville, the city hall. The march is a nightmare for the governor. The faces pressing in on him are twisted with absolute hatred. A butcher, still wearing his blood-stained leather apron, walks beside him. Delaunay, broken and terrified, finally snaps. He kicks a baker in the groin and shouts, "Let me die!" The crowd obliges. In an explosion of violence on the steps of the city hall, Delaunay is stabbed repeatedly with bayonets and pikes. The mob descends on him. When the frenzy clears, a young cook, an unemployed man named Desnos, uses a pocket knife to saw off the governor's head. As evening descends on Paris, the mood of the city is a terrifying mixture of manic celebration, profound grief, and deep, lingering paranoia. The sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in bruises of purple and red. But the city does not go dark. Bonfires are lit in every public square. The flames cast long, dancing shadows against the stone facades of the buildings. Through the winding streets, a macabre procession makes its way. The severed head of Governor Delaunay, along with the head of the city's chief magistrate, who was also murdered by the mob, are impaled on the ends of long iron pikes. The crowd parades them through the city by torchlight, a gruesome warning to any who would oppose the will of the people. The flickering orange light catches the dead, staring eyes of the governor. The people sing, they dance around the bonfires, they drink wine looted from the toll houses. But beneath the revelry, there is a frantic, nervous energy. They know what they have done. They have attacked the king's fortress, murdered his officers, and stolen his weapons. They expect a massive military retaliation before dawn. Because of this fear, Paris transforms itself under the cover of night. The city becomes a fortress. Women and children carry heavy paving stones up to the rooftops, ready to drop them on the heads of advancing royal cavalry. Men use picks and shovels to tear up the cobblestones, dragging overturned carts, heavy wooden barrels, and stolen furniture to build massive barricades across the main thoroughfares. The clinking of metal on stone and the chopping of wood echo through the night. To bring order to the chaos, the wealthy bourgeoisie, terrified of both the king's army and the uncontrollable mob, hastily organize a citizens' militia. Middle-class men, armed with the muskets taken from the Invalides, begin patrolling the streets by torchlight. They tie red and blue ribbons, the colors of Paris, around their arms, adding the royal white to create the tricolor. This is the birth of the National Guard. They stop pedestrians, demanding passwords, breaking up fights, and trying to impose a fragile peace on a city that has completely lost its mind. The air cools slightly, but the smell of smoke, spilled blood, and gunpowder is permanently etched into the fabric of the city. In the Faubourg Saint-Antoine, a mother sits on the steps of her tenement, weeping silently into her apron for a son who died in the courtyard of the Bastille. In the Palais Royal, the cafes are still open, the agitators still drinking, toasting to the fall of the great fortress, their voices hoarse but triumphant. In the dark, empty shell of the Bastille itself, citizens wander through the open gates with torches, marveling at the thickness of the walls, running their hands over the cold stone, scarcely believing that the impregnable monster has been slain. And 12 miles away, in the impossibly vast and quiet palace of Versailles, King Louis XVI is preparing for bed. The air here is sweet with the scent of manicured gardens and expensive perfume. The king is tired. He had been hunting earlier in the day and had a poor outing, unaware of the smoke rising from his capital, unaware of the severed heads on pikes, unaware that the absolute power of his ancestors has just been irrevocably shattered. He opens his hunting diary. He picks up a quill, dips it in ink, and writes a single word to describe the day's events. Rien. Nothing. But as the clocks in Paris strike midnight, ending the 14th of July, 1789, the fires burning in the streets illuminate a truth the king does not yet know. The medieval world is dead. The subjects have become citizens. The people have tasted their own power, and the world will never, ever be the same again. Please like and subscribe for more videos like this.